What's going on, guys? Today I want to talk to you about building your own individual first aid kit, or IFAK kit for short. Before we get started, I want to tell you guys what an individual first aid kit is, or again, an IFAK kit for short. An IFAK kit is a compact medical kit that is designed to provide immediate life-saving treatment in emergency situations, especially trauma-related emergencies. IFAK kits are typically carried by military personnel, law enforcement personnel, EMS personnel, and civilians in high-risk environments. It is important that you have quality medical supplies in these situations because, again, they're designed to treat life threats. The company I use to build my own individual first aid kit is MedicBox. So today we're going to go over everything that is in this individual first aid kit, why I keep them in my individual first aid kit, and their purpose in my IFAK kit. So let's open up the kit and see what's inside. So again, guys, when we're talking about an IFAK kit, it's really mostly related to traumatic injuries and anything trauma related in an emergency setting. So most of these things that I keep in my IFAK kit are, again, they're specifically designed for emergency situations that deal with trauma. So when we're talking about traumatic emergencies, the very first thing that comes to mind is circulation. We want to make sure that person's circulation is intact, i.e. we want to make sure that person doesn't have any uncontrolled bleeding. And a lot of the things in our IFAK kit, again, is related to traumatic emergencies as it pertains to stopping and controlling bleeds. So when we're talking about traumatic injuries and circulation and controlling a person's bleeding, the very first thing you want to do with any uncontrolled bleed is want to put direct pressure on it, i.e. you want to take a gloved hand and apply direct pressure to see if that stops the bleed. So if a gloved hand with direct pressure doesn't stop the bleed, that's when we go to the other components of our IFAK kit. So once we realize we can't control the bleeding with a gloved hand and direct pressure, we want to go to our gauze. We want to go to our gauze as our next form of intervention. So why we use gauze next is, again, we want our body to promote natural healing factors and natural clotting factors. So by removing our gloved hand and applying gauze to that area and putting our gloved hand back on top with that pressure, we're attempting to promote the body's natural healing factors and natural clotting factors. And again, we want to stop the uncontrolled bleeding. We're going to put our gauze right here in our IFAK pack. Again, you pack your individual first aid kit the way that suits you and the way that you feel you can get to everything you need to as easily and quickly as possible. You want to make this thing as accessible to you as possible. If we're unable to stop direct pressure with the compressed gauze, we go to our next step. And our next step, we're going to get an emergency pressure bandage. We're going to have an emergency pressure bandage on top of our gauze. So again, we're trying to stop the bleeding. We're trying to stop uncontrolled bleeding. And the way to stop uncontrolled bleeding, again, you want to promote the body's natural healing factors, natural clotting factors, and you want to continue to apply pressure. This bandage is going to help, again, achieve that goal. With the pressure that you're not getting with your gloved hand and the gauze, this pressure bandage is, again, going to apply even more pressure to try to promote those natural healing factors, those natural clotting factors, i.e. providing more pressure around the wound. So again, you rip this thing off, you tie it around, you put as much pressure on it as you need to see if you can stop the bleed. We're going to take our pressure bandage, and I keep mine right here on this side. Also in my individual first aid kit, I keep some duct tape. I keep duct tape in my individual first aid kit because, again, trying to keep makeshift bandages, these emergency situations under control, and keep the things that we do to make sure that they don't move, especially any type of wraps. Again, we're dealing with messy situations and sometimes a lot of bleeding. So whatever bandages we do make, we want to make sure that they stay in place and keep control and keep pressure on those bleeds so that they stop the bleeding. So I always keep some duct tape with me. Again, you want to make sure that you can secure any bandages that you have. Again, sometimes it's the most simplest things that we need in emergency situations that could end up saving our life. So I put my duct tape, again, you want to make everything easy accessible. So I can put it right here, right on the bottom of my IFAK kit. Now, there are some areas where we're unable to reach or unable to wrap pressure bandages because, again, just where they're located anatomically. And we have to stop the bleeding in those areas, but we're not able to wrap with an emergency pressure bandage because, again, the way that the wound and where it is anatomically. That's where we come to our hemostatic dressing. Our hemostatic dressing is for those wounds that we cannot control the bleeding, and also for wounds that are in places where we cannot wrap with an emergency bandage. So for anyone out there that's not familiar with how hemostatic dressing works, Hemostatic dressing is basically used to promote those clotting factors. It promotes those clotting factors in those wounds that, again, we're unable to reach when it comes to applying a pressure bandage. So it can be packed into the wound. Again, it's packed into the wound to stop those bleeds, especially very severe bleeds. When you're dealing with any type of arterial bleed that you can't get a tourniquet around, this hemostatic dressing is going to come in very, very handy, because again, you pack those wounds with this hemostatic dressing. It promotes and adds clotting factors to help stop those bleeds. This is good for like any kind of gunshot wounds, stab wounds that can't be, again, accessed because where they are anatomically. So you definitely want to make sure you keep some hemostatic dressing in your IFAK kit at all times. So I keep my hemostatic dressing. I keep it right on this side, right behind my emergency pressure bandage. Also, a good thing to keep into your individual IFAK kits or your individual first aid kits, you want to make sure you have some good chest seals. You want to make sure you have good chest seals in your individual first aid kit. So to expand on what we talked about with the hemostatic dressing, when you have puncture wounds, i.e. gunshot wounds or stab wounds, especially in the chest area, that can affect your respiratory, that can affect your breathing. So what these chest seal does, it provides us an opportunity to help you in respiratory distress. Because what happens when you get those gunshot wounds and you get those stab wounds, you end up developing either tension pneumothoraxis or spontaneous pneumothoraxis, depending on the severity of your traumatic injury. So what these chest seals does is it allows us to help with that respiratory distress by closing off those puncture spots, by closing off those entry wounds while still addressing your respiratory problem. So you apply the chest seal, we apply it on 3 different sides. And when we're monitoring you, as we're monitoring you with your respirations, we can do what's called burping the seal. So if you feel like that you're having respiratory distress because you're not getting the proper exchange, ventilatory exchange, what we do is we'll burp the seal to help you with your respiratory distress until we can properly get you to the hospital and get those things addressed. But in an emergency situation in the field, you want to make sure that that person's breathing is not compromised. So that's what these chest seals are designed to do, to help manage those puncture wounds from any kind of gunshot or stabbing. So with my chest seals, I tend to keep them on this side right here in the back. Some other things you want to make sure you keep in your IFAK. You want to make sure you have you a good pair of trauma shears, because again, depending on where the person is bleeding, you might not be able to see the bleed on initial assessment. You want to be able to expose that patient. So we have to cut shirts, we have to cut pants in order to get to where the person might be bleeding or where they might be experiencing a traumatic injury. So you always want to make sure you have a good pair of trauma shears. Another thing you want to make sure you have in your IFAK kit, you want to make sure you have a pen light. You want to make sure you have a good pen light. This pen light is going to help you assess a person's pupils. The reason that is important because depending on a person's pupil size or how their pupils are reacting in that traumatic situation, it can help lead you to a place of determining whether this person may be experiencing some type of intracranial pressure from a head injury, i.e. some type of bleed in their head. A lot of times, whether they have constricted pupils, dilated pupils, uneven pupils, these are all things that can help you go down the path or lead you to suspect that this person might be dealing with some type of bleed in their head. So you want to make sure you have a good pen light in your IFAK kit as well. Last but not least, I say the best for last. Anytime you're talking about an individual first aid kit, you need to make sure you have a good tourniquet. You need to make sure you have a good cat tourniquet on board any individual first aid kit. This is an absolute necessity. Make sure you have a good tourniquet. Again, we're talking about controlling bleeds. Sometimes you might have what's called an arterial bleed. An arterial bleed cannot be stopped by any of these other mechanisms that I've shown you. An arterial bleed, you need a tourniquet to stop that bleed. You have to cut circulation off to that particular part of the body. When I was telling you guys about that hemostatic dressing, you have obviously areas of your body where you aren't able to use a tourniquet. So that's where that hemostatic dressing is designed to stop those arterial bleeds as well, to promote those clotting factors. Not saying it's going to, work 100% of the time, but again, that's all we have in those places where anatomically you just can't get a tourniquet around. But places like your arms, legs, your limbs pretty much, you want to make sure you have these tourniquets for any type of injuries to your limbs, especially any type of arterial bleeds, because this is going to be the only way to stop those bleeds. So you have to make sure you have a tourniquet. I say it one more time, you have to have a tourniquet in any individual first aid kit. Any kit that's out there, any kit that you build on your own, you make sure you have a tourniquet. So I keep my tourniquet right here on the outside. So again, you want to make sure your kits are always as easily accessible as possible. So I keep that tourniquet right there on the outside. It's the very first thing that I can reach for if I come on scene, if I'm dealing with any type of traumatic injury where I suspect or I can blatantly see that the patient is having arterial bleed. I have it right here on the outside. I don't got to open it up, whip it out, put it on the patient, and let's get it moving. So guys, that's pretty much the gist of it. That's everything that I keep in my IFAK kit. Again, I get my individual first aid supplies from Medic Box. They're a very good company. All their medical supplies are of great quality. I haven't had any issues with them. Again, if you're going to do a IFAK kit, if you're going to keep one for yourself, especially if you are in any one of those fields that we discussed earlier, if you're in the military, if you're in law enforcement, if you're in EMS, or you're just a civilian, if you like to go out and do things as far as like survival things, if you like to do outdoors things, anything that puts you in a environment to where you could be exposed to any type of traumatic injury, you want to make sure you have a good individual first aid kit with you at all times. Again, the things in these kits are for life threats and life safety, and they can be the difference between buying you a few extra minutes or a few extra hours to get you to where you need to be in order to get the treatment that you need. If you liked the video that you saw today, please make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. Also, please stay tuned for more videos in the future.